This is completely unacceptable, Marissa. Your negligence has cost this institute millions. Dr. Victor Brenner's voice thundered across the sleek, glass-walled conference room, ricocheting off the polished surfaces and causing a few of my colleagues to shift uncomfortably in their seats. I stayed still, my hands folded tightly in my lap, heart pounding in my ears. The quarterly operations meeting had transformed into a firing squad, and I was the one in the crosshairs. My name is Marissa Quaid. I'm 59 years old, and for the past 17 years, I've poured everything I had into Pinnacle Biogenetics, a research institute nestled in the heart of Boulder, Colorado. I was the senior compliance officer, the one who made sure every regulation was followed, every inspection passed, and every lab technician understood the sacred responsibility of handling data that could impact human lives. Now, without warning, I was being sacrificed to protect a system that had quietly turned corrupt. The Department of Health and Human Services has revoked our funding due to irregularities in our compliance documentation, Brenner continued, his tone sharp and rehearsed. We've lost $8.4 million in active grants, an unforgivable failure. His hand slammed against the conference table, punctuating his outrage. I wanted to speak up, to explain what had really been happening since the acquisition. 6 months ago, Nexapharm Incorporated, a fast-moving biotech conglomerate, had bought out our once independent institute. Since then, standards had plummeted. Protocols were rewritten, deadlines shortened, and labs flooded with young hires more focused on ambition than accuracy. This wasn't about negligence. It was about control. And they had decided I was the problem. As of this afternoon, Marissa Quaid is no longer with Pinnacle Biogenetics. Her office will be cleared by end of day. There was no room for rebuttal. I stood, adjusted the slate-gray blazer I'd worn on my very first day nearly 2 decades ago, and walked out without a word. My heels clicked along the hallway's tile floor, echoing louder than the murmurs left behind. As I passed the lab wing, Dr. Bryn Callahan, one of Nexapharm's newest golden hires, glanced up. Our eyes met briefly before she looked away, her cheeks flushed with guilt. That glance confirmed what I had long suspected. They knew the truth. What they didn't know, however, was that I had been documenting everything. Call it foresight or just a lifetime of professional instinct, but I kept a private set of records, paper, not digital. I recorded every deviation, every shortcut, every undocumented reagent switch, and protocol override. I had backups of emails, compliance discrepancies, and internal memos. I wasn't just the compliance officer. I was the last wall standing between real science and corporate manipulation. Back when Pinnacle was just a modest lab with a narrow focus on endocrine disorders, our founder, Dr. Clarice Langford, would remind us, real breakthroughs require real diligence. We celebrated data, not profits. We prioritized caution over convenience. But when Dr. Langford retired 5 years ago, the tone shifted. The new executives brought with them flashy partnerships and promises of faster results. Then came the merger. And with it, the slow erosion of the scientific method. But now I had everything I needed. I wasn't going quietly. And I wasn't going alone. I stood at my desk, methodically packing away 17 years of dedication into a plain cardboard box. I tucked away the framed group photo of our original autoimmune research team, half of whom had moved on to prestigious universities or startups. The certificate for Excellence in Laboratory Oversight from the American Bioethics Council slid in next, followed by the yellowing, handwritten note from Dr. Clarice Langford, our founder, thanking me for my unwavering integrity and commitment to truth. Ms. Quaid, do you need help? I looked up to see Thomas Kimball standing in the doorway, his fingers fidgeting with his ID badge. He was a junior lab tech I'd mentored 3 years ago, a thoughtful young man with good instincts and a genuine curiosity for process safety. His expression was a mix of concern and awkward unease. "Thank you, Thomas," I said gently. "But I've got it handled." I gave him a small smile and gestured toward the nearly full box. Just remember what I taught you, especially when it comes to protocol documentation. Keep copies, back up your work, and log everything, especially chemical storage records. His brow furrowed. Is that what this is about? The chemical logs. Among other things, I replied, choosing my words with care. Just protect yourself. And don't ignore red flags no matter where they come from. He nodded and left, still looking unsettled. Once the hallway was quiet again, I knelt beside my desk, unlocking the bottom drawer. From inside, I pulled out a slim, black notebook, worn at the corners, its cover creased with time. My ledger. My shadow file. I slipped it into my bag, along with a USB drive that mirrored its contents. The office around me, once vibrant with purpose, now felt like a museum exhibit. My aloe plant by the window had grown tall and crooked from years of low light and resilience. The periodic table pinned to my wall was annotated with my own scribbled notes, a running joke among my coworkers, who called it Marissa's version. I lingered for one last look. Then I flipped off the light, pulled the door shut behind me, and whispered a quiet goodbye to the place that had defined most of my adult life. That evening at home, I sat at my kitchen table beneath the flicker of the overhead bulb, the contents of my personal ledger spread before me like pieces of a puzzle. My notes were detailed: irregularities in chemical inventories, inconsistencies in test results, printouts of internal emails that clashed with what was submitted to regulators. I had a paper trail, and I knew how to follow it. A pattern had started to emerge, clear and undeniable. It had all begun when Dr. Bryn Callahan launched a high-speed clinical trial for a new arthritis compound. By regulation, several key chemicals in that trial required 72-hour containment periods and specialized environmental monitoring. But the logs showed them used at 12-hour intervals, impossible unless corners were being cut or documentation forged. When I brought it up to Dr. Brenner, he'd brushed me off with, "Dr. Callahan has executive authorization for an accelerated protocol." No explanation, no written directive. Just silence and tension. Then came the trial data, suspiciously flawless. No statistical outliers, no dosage inconsistencies. Clean as a marketing brochure. I raised a concern about the too perfect metrics. The response? Nexapharm uses different standards now. Stay in your lane, Marissa. The final nail came when I reviewed my digital access logs. On 3 separate nights when I was home, according to both badge swipes and security camera timestamps, my credentials had been used to approve critical compliance changes. The same changes now being cited to justify my dismissal. Someone had forged my digital signature. My stomach twisted. 17 years of spotless work, and they had made me the fall person for a fraud I hadn't committed. My phone buzzed on the table. A text from Thomas. "Everyone's in shock. They're already interviewing your replacement." Callahan's acting nervous. I stared at the screen and exhaled slowly. Good. She should be. Because I wasn't done yet. Nervous but focused, I took a steady breath and opened my laptop. The hum of the machine seemed louder in the quiet stillness of my living room. With methodical precision, I began organizing the evidence. First, I composed a detailed letter to the Institutional Ethics Review Board, outlining the falsified data, the manipulated safety logs, and naming those directly responsible. Every statement I included had supporting documentation, screenshots, email threads, and my own handwritten ledger entries. Next came the report to the Occupational Safety and Health Administration. I included timestamped photos of chemical containers improperly stored, logs showing impossible turnaround times for restricted compounds, and internal messages suggesting I look the other way. The more I worked, the calmer I felt. My initial anger had transformed into purpose. This wasn't about vengeance. It never had been. It was about truth. About protecting the core of what science is supposed to be: honest, careful, and accountable. Scientific integrity should never be the first casualty of corporate pressure. By midnight, both reports were complete. I saved them to encrypted drives and prepared my emails, set to send at dawn. I powered down my laptop, stood, and walked to the window. The streets of Boulder were quiet beneath the glow of the street lamps, peaceful and unaware of what tomorrow would bring. I laid out my clothes for the morning, my navy blue blazer. The one I had worn on my very first day at Pinnacle Biogenetics. The one I wore when they thought they were escorting me out for good. They had underestimated me. One last visit remained. One final duty to the truth I'd spent my life defending. The next morning, sunlight crept through my kitchen blinds as I sipped my coffee and reread both documents, line by line. Every claim was supported, every detail verified. I had never been careless. I'd been exacting, principled, and most importantly, prepared. At 8:05 a.m., I hit send. First to the ethics board, then to OSHA. An unexpected sense of peace washed over me. Whatever happened now, I'd spoken the truth. I'd done what I was supposed to do. My phone lit up seconds later. Incoming call. Pinnacle Biogenetics. I let it ring. Then came another. Victor Brenner. Decline. I didn't need to hear their backpedaling or veiled threats. The evidence would speak louder than they ever could. I dressed carefully, buttoning my blazer with steady hands. I placed a sealed envelope into my shoulder bag, filled with printed copies of everything I had submitted electronically. Redundancy had always been my strength. Then I drove to the lab one final time. The front receptionist looked up, startled. "Miss Quaid, we were told." "I'm just dropping something off, Diane," I said calmly, handing her the envelope. "Please make sure this reaches the board of directors. It's urgent." As I turned to leave, I spotted Dr. Bryn Callahan coming down the hallway fast, her heels clacking anxiously against the tile. "Marissa, wait," she called out. I stopped, letting her approach. Up close, she looked exhausted. Her face was pale, and her eyes bore the sleepless weight of guilt. "Can we talk?" she asked in a hushed voice. "Privately. I don't think there's anything left to say, Dr. Callahan." "Please," she insisted, glancing around nervously. "What happened yesterday, it wasn't right. I wanted to speak up, but you chose silence," I said for her. "Just like you chose to falsify the chemical storage logs. Just like you used my credentials to push through unauthorized documentation." Her face blanched. "How did you?" 17 years, I said softly. "I know every system in that lab. Every login, every security camera blind spot, every audit trail. Did you really think I wouldn't notice?" "It was Brenner," she whispered. "He said we had to make the numbers look good for Nexapharm's quarterly report. He said you were slowing us down." "Those slowdowns were safeguards," I replied evenly. "They're what keep our research credible. They're what keep people safe." "But it doesn't," she began. And I finished her sentence in my head. "Matter anymore." But oh, it still did. It mattered now more than ever. "Documentation and testimony. We can ensure that appropriate action is taken," Dr. Novak said, her voice steady with conviction. Just then, my phone buzzed. I glanced at the screen, and a flicker of surprise crossed my face. "It's from the National Institutes of Health Office of Research Integrity," I said, quickly scanning the message. "They're requesting a formal interview regarding the grant application and the events at Pinnacle Biogenetics." Dr. Novak nodded, unsurprised. The dominoes are falling. Once one oversight body gets involved, others tend to follow. "The system's slow, but not blind." She leaned forward, her gaze clear and unwavering. "Marissa, I want you to understand something. What you've done, standing up for scientific integrity at great personal cost, is exactly what this institution was founded to protect. I'm deeply sorry that the lab I built failed you so profoundly." Her words caught me off guard. My throat tightened as emotion welled up, unexpected and long overdue. "Thank you," I said, my voice soft but steady. "That means more than you know." Later that afternoon, driving home beneath the late autumn sun filtering through golden aspens, my phone rang again. This time, it was a number I didn't recognize. I answered cautiously. Ms. Quaid? This is William Harrington from the University of Michigan Medical Research Division. Dr. Novak recommended I reach out. We're currently expanding our compliance and ethics training program. Would you be open to discussing a leadership position with us? I blinked, stunned for a moment. Vindication swept over me not because I wanted revenge, but because I finally felt seen. Understood. Respected. Yes, I replied. I'd be happy to talk. The interview was scheduled 3 days later. I flew to Ann Arbor with no expectations, only a quiet determination to represent what I stood for. During the panel, I outlined my experience in compliance oversight, the challenges of maintaining integrity in an increasingly corporate research environment, and the personal cost of doing the right thing. To my surprise, I wasn't met with suspicion or polite indifference. I saw nods of agreement, respect in their eyes. Dr. Novak's recommendation carries considerable weight, Dr. Harrington said as he walked me out. But your composure and clarity throughout the Pinnacle situation speaks volumes. This university needs ethical leadership. We believe you can help lead that change. That afternoon, I received a formal offer, Director of Research Integrity and Compliance Training. The role would oversee ethics programs across the university's medical and biological research departments. It was more than a position, it was a platform. Meanwhile, Pinnacle Biogenetics continued to unravel under the weight of investigation. Local news outlets confirmed OSHA had issued 27 citations, 7 classified as serious. Fines exceeded $300,000. But the true cost was the collapse of public trust. And then came the bombshell. Dr. Bryn Callahan, under pressure from federal investigators, admitted to falsifying data at the direct instruction of Dr. Victor Brenner. She provided emails, even recorded conversations, showing a deliberate effort to manipulate research outcomes to secure funding and impress Meditex's board. 1 week after my meeting with Dr. Novak, my phone rang once more. This time, the voice on the other end was calm, almost humbled. Ms. Quaid, this is Harold Winthrop, chairman of the board at Pinnacle Biogenetics. I wonder if you'd be willing to meet with us. We've launched an internal investigation in parallel with federal inquiries, and your insights could help us repair the damage. My first instinct was to decline outright. These were the same people who allowed my dismissal, who stood by while my name was dragged through the mud. But then I thought of Dr. Novak. Her resilience. Her desire to see the institution she'd built redeemed. I'll meet with you, I said. But only with my legal representative present. 2 days later, I sat across from the board in the very same conference room where I'd once been humiliated. This time, however, I wasn't the one on trial. The boardroom where just weeks earlier I'd been publicly dismissed now felt like an entirely different universe. The air was subdued, serious. The board members looked tired, humbled, even, and several glanced away as I entered. Malcolm's chair sat conspicuously empty at the head of the table. "Where is Dr. Brenner?" I asked, keeping my tone even as the meeting began. Harold Winthrop, the board chairman, cleared his throat. "Dr. Brenner has been terminated, effective immediately. We've also dissolved several key contracts with Nexapharm and are currently restructuring our entire leadership team." I nodded, maintaining a professional expression, though I felt a private flicker of satisfaction. "Ms. Quaid," Winthrop continued, "we owe you a profound apology. What happened to you was not only unjust, it may very well prove to have been criminal. The board has unanimously authorized a full offer of reinstatement, including a significant compensation package to address the damage done to your career and reputation." My attorney and I exchanged a look. We had anticipated this. "I appreciate the offer," I said carefully, "but I've accepted another position. That said, I'd be willing to consult during your transition to help you rebuild proper oversight procedures and restore compliance standards." Relief spread visibly across their faces. They weren't just looking for redemption. They were looking for someone who could guide them out of the wreckage. We negotiated the terms carefully, a formal public apology, a full retraction of the allegations made against me, and compensation not just for lost wages, but for reputational harm. As we left the meeting, my attorney chuckled. That went better than expected. They're desperate, I replied quietly. The NIH has suspended every active grant they had pending investigation. Without certification and oversight, their research future is hanging by a thread. That evening, my phone buzzed. A text from Thomas Kimball, my former trainee. They announced everything at an all-staff meeting today. Brenner's out. Callahan's out. They even said, "You were right all along." A few people applauded. Wish you could have seen it. I smiled but didn't reply right away. Instead, I opened my laptop and began outlining a transition plan for Pinnacle Biogenetics, my final contribution to the lab I had served for 17 years. I wrote clearly, firmly. My goal wasn't punishment. It was prevention. Sometimes, I reflected, the most powerful kind of redemption isn't about revenge. It's about helping rebuild what was broken, only stronger this time. What I hadn't expected was the congressional hearing. 6 months after I hit send on those initial whistleblower reports, I found myself seated before the House Committee on Science, Space, and Technology. The hearing room buzzed with reporters and television crews. Seated at a separate table were Malcolm Brenner and 3 executives from Nexapharm, their faces tight with discomfort and fatigue. They had already faced federal charges for falsifying data and defrauding grant programs. Now they faced the court of public opinion. Ms. Quaid, began Congresswoman Elena Diaz, who led the panel, can you walk us through the chain of events that led to your discovery of the compliance violations at Pinnacle Biogenetics? For the next hour, I laid it all out. The culture shift after the Nexapharm acquisition. The replacement of qualified staff with corporate loyalists. The dangerous shortcuts taken in pursuit of results. The falsified data, and how my credentials had been misused to cover it up. And how, when I refused to stay silent, I had been publicly scapegoated. And in your professional opinion, asked a second committee member, how common are these types of unethical practices across the industry? More common than we'd like to admit, I answered without hesitation. The pressure to produce results and secure funding can easily outweigh ethical considerations. That's why we need stronger whistleblower protections and independent oversight in corporate research environments. My testimony aired across national media. Clips of my composed, fact-driven answers stood in stark contrast to Malcolm's defensive stammering and carefully rehearsed denials. And for the first time in a long while, I no longer felt like a casualty of a broken system. I felt like the catalyst for its repair. The contrast between my calm, evidence-backed testimony and the evasions from Nexapharm's executives was undeniable. Public opinion quickly began to shift. Across headlines and televised debates, a clear consensus emerged. Private research institutions needed more oversight, and the standards of scientific integrity needed reinforcement, urgently. As I stepped down from the witness stand, Dr. Novak was waiting at the side of the hearing room. She reached for my hand, squeezing it firmly. You've done more than expose a single lab's corruption, she whispered. You sparked a national conversation. I nodded, emotions caught in my throat. The roar of reporters filled the corridor, voices rising with questions and camera shutters. Across the hallway, I caught sight of Malcolm Brenner standing near the chamber doors, flanked by his lawyer. His face, once brimming with arrogance, was now tight with defeat. Our eyes met for a brief, loaded moment before he turned away. He had lost everything, his title, his influence, and soon, his freedom. But I had gained something he never valued, vindication. 1 year to the day after my forced resignation from Pinnacle Biogenetics, I stood at a podium in one of the largest lecture halls at the University of Michigan. Before me sat a packed audience of students, professors, and visiting researchers. My presentation topic, Ethical Guardianship, Maintaining Integrity in Scientific Research. The pressures you'll face in your careers are real, I told them. Grants, deadlines, competition, corporate interests. But the moment you sacrifice scientific integrity is the moment you stop being a scientist and become something else entirely. Something less valuable to humanity. In my role at the university, I'd developed a comprehensive ethics training curriculum now being adopted by research institutions across the country. My experience, once an embarrassing footnote in a corporate report, had become a case study, a lesson in resilience, and a call to higher standards. After the lecture, as attendees filtered out, I noticed a familiar face approaching, Thomas Kimball, my former lab technician. "Dr. Quaid," he said, smiling widely. "That was incredible." "It's just Professor now," I replied gently, shaking his hand. "How are things at Pinnacle?" "Completely different," he said. "They've implemented every protocol you outlined. The new leadership is committed to transparency. We're a smaller team now, but the work feels honest again." We chatted for a few minutes, catching up. Pinnacle had survived, though its reputation and size had taken a blow. Nexapharm had paid hundreds of millions in fines and settlements. Malcolm and two of the top executives had been sentenced to federal prison for fraud. Dr. Bryn Callahan avoided incarceration by fully cooperating with authorities, but her scientific career had quietly ended. Thomas hesitated before speaking again. "I've been offered a research position here, at the university," he said. "I was wondering, would you consider being my advisor?" I smiled, remembering the young technician who had asked the right questions when no one else dared to. "I'd be honored, Thomas." Later that evening, as I settled into my office, an email notification lit up my screen. It was from the Journal of Bioethics and Research Policy. "Your article on research ethics reform has been accepted for publication." The system wasn't perfect. It never would be. But it was evolving slowly, steadily, in the right direction. And I had played my part. I never imagined that standing up for what was right would cost me everything, and then give me more than I ever thought possible. If my story resonated with you, I ask you to stand with me. Leave a comment below, not just for me, but for anyone who's ever been silenced for speaking the truth. Your words of support might be the encouragement someone else needs to take a stand in their own life. This journey wasn't about revenge. It was about resilience. About refusing to allow fear or power to distort the purpose of science, the truth of our work, or the worth of our integrity. Whether you're a researcher, a student, a teacher, or someone simply navigating your own storm, I want you to know this. Doing the right thing is never easy, but it is always worth it. Let my story be a reminder that you are not powerless. Systems change when people push back, speak up, and refuse to be complicit. If you're in a position where something feels wrong, trust your instincts. Document it. Protect yourself. But most of all, don't let anyone convince you that silence is safer than truth. It never is. I'd love to hear your thoughts. What challenges have you faced in standing up for what you believe in? Share your experiences. Let's build a conversation that reminds others they are not alone. Let's normalize integrity not as a heroic act, but as a daily standard. Because the moment we normalize truth over fear is the moment real change begins. And to those who are still watching from the sidelines, you may be the next one to make a difference. I believe in you. Now believe in yourself.